The first note arrived folded in my own handwriting, though I had never written it. I found it tucked beneath the saucer of my morning tea, steam curling up in lazy spirals that now felt like smoke signaling danger. My heart stuttered before it started hammering in my chest. The note read only two words: watch her. The penmanship was unmistakably mine, slanting just enough to be convincing, each letter precise yet urgent. And yet I had no memory of having written it. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. My mind racing. Was it a prank? Or something far more sinister? The kitchen clock ticked away in heavy, deliberate beats, the silence of my Dallas home on a Thursday morning in July pressing in on me. Summer heat filtered through the blinds, but I could feel only the chill crawling up my spine. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Keys weren't where I usually left them. My small leather wallet had been moved, grocery receipts from yesterday's market run stacked in a different order. $52.13 for organic vegetables, $16.45 for coffee beans. These numbers felt suddenly weighted with meaning. My son's room down the hall was quiet, the faint hum of his air conditioner masking what I imagined were whispers of conspiracy. At first, suspicion pointed to Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. She hovered near my office when I balanced the books, always impeccably polite, observant, helpful. Could she have left it as a warning or a trap? But then, small inconsistencies gave me pause. The way she had gently nudged a receipt toward me the night before, her eyes flicking toward the ledger as if urging me to notice something. A signal, maybe? My mind refused to dismiss the possibility. I remembered the previous evening. Vanessa lingered near the kitchen counter while I tallied receipts from the city's bank deposits. She smiled when I showed her the statement of a pending $32,000 transfer for the house renovation, a project I'd started a decade ago, my so-called retirement fund. Everything looks in order, Rowan, she said softly, tilting her head. Her voice carried that faint undertone of reassurance I now questioned. But could it have been genuine, a silent ally in disguise? The note fluttered in my hand as I rifled through the drawer where I kept other papers. Utility bills, bank statements, old contracts. One envelope caught my eye, postmarked July 12th, 3 days ago. I hadn't opened it yet. Inside was another note, same handwriting, same urgency. She's not who she seems. I dropped the envelope onto the counter. Mind racing, no fingerprints, no ink smudges, nothing to indicate handling, but it felt personal, threatening. I imagined the possibilities: Vanessa, my son's brother, someone else entirely, but then a quiet thought pricked me. Vanessa had been unusually helpful lately, leaving notes on my desk I hadn't noticed before. Subtle, almost invisible, yet I felt she had been guiding me all along. Hours passed. I sat quietly listening to the hum of the summer air conditioning and the faint murmur of traffic outside. I carefully retraced my steps through the house, noting every detail: the slight tilt of the photo frame of our Dallas home, the pen left uncapped on the countertop, the mug with lipstick residue that wasn't mine. Patterns began forming in my mind. Anomalies in handwriting, timing, placement, all suggesting someone was signaling me carefully, deliberately. By midday, I forced myself to sit at my desk, receipts spread in front of me. July 8th, $162.14 at Oakwood Market. July 9th, $84.72 at Central Hardware. July 10th, $28.93 at the local florist. None were large sums, but they were out of sequence, inconsistent with my usual patterns. And yet each purchase had been signed in my name, approved under my account, as if someone wanted me to track them. Someone wanted me to notice. I couldn't decide whether to confront Vanessa immediately. There was a delicate balance between trust and paranoia, between exposure and secrecy. If I misjudged, the perpetrator would know I was suspicious. If I ignored it, the stakes could escalate. I recalled my father's words, long gone but ever present in my mind. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you protect while alive. Every note, every receipt, every anomaly suddenly became part of that legacy. My home, my savings, my family reputation, all on a knife's edge. Evening came. Jordan, my son, returned from work, unaware of the storm brewing. Vanessa prepared dinner, humming softly, hands moving with precision. Every movement felt exaggerated under my scrutiny. Placing napkins just so, aligning forks, her hair tucked neatly behind her ears, a subtle kindness or a signal. I wondered if she had left something small for me to notice, a hint that I wasn't entirely alone in this maze. I walked past her, pretending to check the hallway lights. "Everything all right?" she asked casually. The question sounded ordinary, but I felt it carried layers. I nodded, saying nothing, keeping suspicion close to the chest. Patience, I reminded myself. Whoever had written those notes had put thought into timing and placement. Whoever they were, I had to be methodical. Late that night, after Jordan and Vanessa retired, I revisited the notes under the dim lamp in my study. Each fold, each crease, each slanted stroke became a cipher, a code to be understood. The heat of the summer pressed against the closed windows, but I didn't notice. Every detail mattered, the precise indentation of the pen, the subtle differences in pressure, the odd placement under my tea saucer. I slipped each note into a folder marked Observations, July 2025, alongside grocery receipts, misplaced keys, and bank statements. My hands were steady now, my mind methodical. Fear and doubt hadn't disappeared, but they had transformed into something sharper, more focused, the resolve to uncover the truth. Whoever was behind these notes had made one crucial miscalculation. They had underestimated me. As I leaned back, exhaustion settling in, I whispered to the empty room, "I will find out who's protecting me and who's plotting against me." The note, folded neatly under my tea saucer, waited for the morning sun to reveal its silent message once again. But I would be ready. Every step, every observation, every subtle cue had been logged. And the first piece of this puzzle, this inexplicable note in my own handwriting, was only the beginning. The creaking floorboards outside my study reminded me that even in silence the house was alive, and in that life someone was speaking, someone was guiding, someone was watching, and I, Rowan, would listen. Sleep became a stranger that week. Every creak of the house, every shadow in the hallway felt magnified, charged with danger I couldn't yet name. The notes didn't stop, they multiplied. One appeared on my desk by the old checkbook, another taped to the fridge, and yet another slid beneath the door to Jordan's room. Each carried a subtle urgency, a warning, sometimes only a single word, observe. The handwriting remained convincingly mine. My mind refused to accept coincidence. I replayed conversations over and over, questioning myself. Vanessa's words, soft and casual, had begun to feel loaded. When she said, "Remember to review the monthly utilities," it seemed innocent enough. But then I saw it, a $2,800 utility bill I hadn't authorized. It had been paid, but the ledger entry was subtly altered. My blood ran cold. Whoever was orchestrating this was skilled enough to sow doubt and chaos with the flick of a pen. Emily, my daughter, noticed my trembling hands at dinner. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, eyes sharp and concerned. I forced a smile, but the weight of the unknown pressed down. I could feel the house shrinking around me. Every hallway, every staircase, every living room seemed to pulse with secrets. I took to nightly walks around the neighborhood to clear my mind. The summer air was thick, oppressive, even at 10 p.m. Streetlights threw long shadows, and I imagined figures lurking just beyond the glow. In truth, the house alone held enough shadows to haunt me. Keys misplaced again, receipts from groceries I hadn't bought stacked in the corner of the pantry. Each anomaly gnawed at my composure. I noticed patterns. Notes appeared after certain interactions, calls with the family lawyer, texts from the private investigator, even after Vanessa left the kitchen following account reviews. Every incident seemed connected. Was Vanessa the orchestrator, or the messenger? Each night I would sit in my study with the notes laid before me, cross-referencing dates and times. July 10th, 7:43 a.m. Note under tea saucer, July 12th, 6:12 p.m. Note on fridge. I underlined times, circled recurring phrases, made arrows connecting cryptic messages. My brain became a ledger of fear, anxiety, and obsession. Jordan remained oblivious. He spoke of mundane things, office gossip, weekend plans, sports, I hung on to his words like lifelines, fleeting reminders of normalcy. Yet, even in those moments, I caught myself scanning his room for anomalies. A misplaced book, a drawer left slightly ajar, the angle of his laptop on the desk. Every detail mattered. Vanessa's presence became a paradox. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the storm I felt inside. Sometimes I caught her staring at me from across the room, a subtle, almost imperceptible glance, as if she were urging me to see beyond the surface. Could she have been leaving me breadcrumbs? My fear tangled with a thread of trust I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Late one night, I revisited the $2,800 utility bill. The payment was legitimate, confirmed by the bank statement. July 9th, 8:02 p.m., check number 44127. Yet the ledger showed it approved under a different account line. The discrepancy was subtle, a single digit off. Someone wanted me to notice but not immediately catch the manipulation. My pulse quickened at the realization. Whoever was behind this had patience, precision, and an understanding of my habits. Emily knocked lightly on my study door. "Dad, you've been at this all night. You're scaring me." Her voice carried genuine concern. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. "I'm fine, Emily. Just thinking," I replied. But the lie felt hollow even to me. My family's trust was already a fragile thing, and these notes were straining it further. I started keeping a nightly journal. Dates, times, notes, locations, anomalies, phone logs. Every call from the family lawyer, every bank alert, every grocery receipt was logged meticulously. The private investigator had begun surveillance in discreet ways, but I felt the need to double-check, to control the chaos that now invaded my home. Vanessa sometimes lingered near the study while I wrote, casually offering to fetch a pen or move some papers, as if unaware of the significance of each note I inspected. Yet I caught her subtle cues, fingers brushing over a ledger entry I'd overlooked, a quiet glance toward a misplaced receipt, small gestures almost invisible to anyone else. My suspicion mixed with hope: was she secretly guiding me, or simply careful not to be suspected? Sleep-deprived evenings blurred into restless mornings. Every ring of the phone made me jump. Each email alert triggered a surge of adrenaline. My focus narrowed, the world outside the house faded. Even the summer heat of Dallas became secondary to the storm in my mind. Jordan began noticing my changed behavior. "Dad, you're tense," he said one evening. After dinner, Vanessa, standing beside him, didn't react. Her face calm and unreadable. I felt a strange, unplaceable comfort in her composure. Though I couldn't name why, I nodded. "Just a lot on my mind," I replied. Truth and deception tangled so tightly I could no longer separate them. The turning point came one Thursday, July 15th. Another note appeared, slipped beneath the family planner. "Observe, not act." My hand shook as I read it. Someone was guiding me, setting boundaries, giving instructions without revealing themselves. And yet a strange reassurance crept in. This wasn't just a warning, it was deliberate, precise, almost protective. I spent the rest of the night cross-referencing every note, receipt, and ledger entry, mapping patterns onto the house floor plan I sketched in my journal. Every anomaly, every discrepancy, every gentle nudge by Vanessa became a point of reference. By 2 a.m., exhaustion weighed heavily, but a flicker of clarity emerged. I wasn't being manipulated blindly. Someone was orchestrating a path for me, and I needed to follow it carefully. As I finally lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, I whispered into the darkness, "I will find the truth, and I will protect my family." My eyes closed, but my mind remained alert. Every note, every receipt, every whisper of movement in the house was now part of a larger story, one I intended to understand fully. And even in my weariness, I couldn't shake the sense that Vanessa, calm and composed in the kitchen just hours before, might be the quiet hand guiding me through this storm. I didn't know yet if she was ally or enigma, but something told me she was crucial. I had to watch, listen, and learn. The house fell silent, the summer night pressing against the windows, but my vigilance only sharpened. Shattered evenings had transformed into structured observation. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered. Yet slowly, methodically, I would assemble them. And the one who had set this path before me, whether protector or trickster would soon be revealed. By mid-July, I had transformed the study into a meticulous command center. Every note, receipt, and anomaly was cataloged, filed, and cross-referenced. July 16th, 9:12 a.m., the note under my morning tea. Listen closely. I slipped it into the folder labeled Observations. July 2025, alongside the grocery receipts, the $2,800 utility payment, and the ledger discrepancies. Patterns were emerging, but clarity remained elusive. I installed cameras, discreet, strategically positioned in hallways, entryways, even near the office where I balanced accounts. The idea wasn't to spy indiscriminately, but to document anomalies and gather verifiable proof. Each night I reviewed footage, noting subtle movements, a hand brushing a ledger, a misplaced key, a flicker of hesitation in Jordan's brother Tyler as he passed the study door. Vanessa continued her quiet guidance. Sometimes she lingered near the cameras, ostensibly adjusting them for optimal angles, but I noticed her soft glances toward me, her gentle nods toward small discrepancies I might otherwise overlook. She never said a word. Her instructions came in subtle, almost invisible gestures. A crumpled receipt left in plain view, a grocery note tucked near the fridge, tiny breadcrumbs, and I followed them like a hawk. I engaged the private investigator on July 17th. Tyler's movements have been odd, I told him. I need documentation. Nothing speculative. Dates, times, amounts. Everything recorded. He nodded, professional and discreet, promising to shadow Tyler's routines without alerting the household. Each whispered conversation, every subtle gesture became a thread in a growing tapestry of deception. The house itself became an accomplice in my observation. Floorboards creaked under careful steps. Air conditioning hummed steadily, masking the faint rustling of papers as I checked notes and receipts. Even the ceiling fan, lazy and spinning in the summer heat, seemed to measure time in silent beats of tension. Each day, anomalies stacked misplaced envelopes, slight misalignments of framed photographs, the faint scent of coffee near a ledger that hadn't been touched in months. July 18th, 6:45 p.m. Another note appeared, this time in Jordan's room. Trust the pattern. My pulse quickened. I cross-referenced the dates and locations of every note, every discrepancy. The private investigator confirmed what I suspected. Tyler had been surreptitiously reviewing the accounts, attempting unauthorized access. But there was more. Someone had been watching him as well. Someone guiding the investigation from within the house. My eyes narrowed. Vanessa's subtle interventions were becoming impossible to ignore. I began cataloging all overheard calls. July 15th, 8:32 p.m. Tyler spoke with a colleague at a bank, using a quiet, hurried tone. Check the estate transfer. Don't let him notice. Another time, a whispered discussion about ledger discrepancies, dollar amounts, and misfiled checks. Each snippet was logged, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with physical evidence. The $32,000 renovation fund, the $2,800 utility payment, receipts totaling unexpected sums. The threads formed a map of Tyler's manipulation, but the full picture remained just out of reach. Vanessa's quiet orchestration became more pronounced. July 19th, I noticed a key left under a vase, its usual location slightly shifted. A note hidden behind a framed photo read, "Observe closely, he fears exposure." She had left it there without touching the envelope directly, so subtle that only someone attuned to anomalies could notice. My heart surged. Someone inside the house was actively aiding me, while Tyler remained oblivious. Each night, I reviewed security footage with the private investigator. Tyler's nervous glances, his hesitations near ledgers, the way he handled receipts, all became data points. By July 20th, I had created a detailed ledger of movements, communications, and anomalies. Every anomaly corresponded with a note. Every note with a receipt. Every receipt with a bank transaction. A web was forming, and I was at the center, untangling it with painstaking care. July 21st, Vanessa left another subtle cue, a crumpled grocery receipt under the study lamp, partially hidden. The handwriting wasn't mine, but placement suggested guidance. I didn't touch it at first, just observed. The receipt's numbers matched the pattern of anomalies I had been cataloging. I recorded it in my journal, noting time, location, and the subtle implication someone within the house was orchestrating exposure of Tyler's schemes. The psychological tension intensified. Sleep became fragmented. Every creak, every shadow, every muffled sound seemed loaded with significance. I replayed my conversations with Tyler, recalling his forced smiles, the tightness around his eyes, the occasional flick of irritation when I mentioned receipts or account balances. Each flash of human emotion was evidence. Each detail another thread I could use to assemble the narrative of betrayal. By July 22nd, I had enough preliminary evidence to begin connecting the dots. Notes, receipts, overheard calls, ledger anomalies, and security footage all pointed to Tyler's attempts at manipulation. And yet, Vanessa's subtle breadcrumbs had guided me through, protecting me from missteps and alerting me to critical patterns. Her role remained invisible to others, but I had begun to recognize the choreography she was performing, a silent, precise orchestration toward exposure. The house became a stage. Cameras recorded, footsteps echoed, papers rustled, whispers were caught mid-conversation, all part of the tapestry I was weaving. I reviewed my logs again July 8th to July 22nd, every anomaly accounted for, every note contextualized. The private investigator confirmed Tyler's collusion, the financial discrepancies, and the subtle manipulations of daily life. And Vanessa? She remained a quiet shadow, guiding me carefully toward clarity. By July 23rd, I understood the power of methodical observation. Fear had transformed into strategy. Anxiety had become focus. Every note, every receipt, every subtle gesture, every whispered word was now part of a coherent narrative. Tyler's deception had been exposed, not yet publicly, but clearly visible in the ledger of evidence I had assembled. I leaned back in the study chair, exhausted but resolute. The summer heat pressed against the closed windows, but my mind was cold, sharp, precise. I whispered into the silence, "I see the shadows now. I know who is guiding me, and I know who seeks to harm my family." Vanessa's subtle orchestration had been a lifeline, a protective hand in the storm. The pieces were falling into place. The next steps would require patience, precision, and lawfully executed strategy. By the time I retired for the night, the house felt alive in a different way. Not threatening, but watchful, responsive. Notes, receipts, shadows, all were signals, and I had begun to decode them. Vanessa's presence, quiet but meaningful, had become a beacon. Tyler remained unaware that his every move had been documented, analyzed, and anticipated. The chessboard was set, and I, Rowan, was ready to make my move. By late July, I knew it was time to act. Observation had revealed Tyler's patterns, the subtle manipulations, the whispers behind doors. But watching wasn't enough. He needed to feel the consequences of his greed without realizing it was me pulling the strings. Carefully, methodically, I began setting the first trap. It started with the accounts. Legally, I could freeze specific lines linked to pending transfers without raising suspicion to outsiders, just enough to stall Tyler's movements. On July 24th, I contacted the bank, $32,000 renovation fund, $2,800 utility payment, and a few other minor accounts were placed on temporary hold. I kept a careful record, names, dates, transaction numbers. The paperwork, contracts, and confirmations were neatly filed in my ledger. Evidence would never fail me. I left deliberate, small hints in Tyler's path. A key moved from its usual spot under the hallway vase. A partial receipt left on the dining table. Subtle messages in the margins of shared spreadsheets. Numbers highlighted, dates circled. Inconspicuous annotations that seemed innocent to any passerby. And yet to me they were breadcrumbs, a signal that the trap was in motion. Vanessa's role remained critical. She continued to provide quiet guidance, orchestrating unnoticed interventions. On July 25th, she left a crumpled grocery receipt by my office chair, numbers and dates aligned perfectly with Tyler's ledger anomalies. A subtle nudge, a sign that she was watching and aiding. I began to sense her full scope, not just a helper, but an invisible ally, ensuring every misstep by Tyler was observed and recorded. Tyler's behavior began to change almost immediately. July 26, 3:12 p.m. The private investigator called. "He's anxious, moving faster than usual, checking ledgers multiple times a day. He senses interference. That interference, of course, was my trap. But he had no idea I was guiding every movement. Each step he took was anticipated, each reaction documented. I positioned allies strategically. Emily observed errands and daily routines, noting anything unusual, packages delivered, keys misplaced, conversations overheard. My sister Margaret monitored visits from family friends and Tyler's associates, recording behavior without tipping him off. Together, our household became a network of quiet vigilance, each member a node in a web of protection and exposure. I left another subtle hint for Tyler on July 27th. A ledger entry was slightly altered, an unusual annotation visible in the shared spreadsheet. Tyler noticed immediately, his eyes narrowing in irritation. I watched from my study, hidden, recording his reaction on camera. Each micro-expression, tight lips, raised brow, a sigh of frustration was data, proof, and a stepping stone toward the ultimate reveal. Vanessa's interventions were the quiet backbone of my plan. July 28th, I found another note tucked beneath a stack of old bank statements. Observe and wait. It was unsigned but perfectly placed. I recognized her handwriting's subtle imprint, the gentlest of pressure points in the paper, almost imperceptible. It reassured me that the orchestrator within the house was firmly on my side. By July 29th, the tension in the household was palpable. Tyler moved like a man walking on thin ice. His usual bravado had been replaced with calculated steps, cautious glances, and an underlying panic he couldn't identify. I kept careful track, July 29th, 8:03 a.m., checking the ledger, 12:17 p.m., reviewing account balances, 6:45 p.m., moving files between rooms. Each movement logged, each anomaly captured on camera. I continued to manipulate the environment subtly. A key left slightly ajar, a misplaced receipt from a minor grocery run, the sound of footsteps timed to coincide with ledger checks. Small, controlled disruptions designed to heighten his unease. Tyler didn't realize these were not mistakes but carefully planted signals, legal and plausible, designed to lead him to reveal himself. Vanessa occasionally lingered nearby, always quiet, never obtrusive, yet her guidance was unmistakable. July 30th, I caught her repositioning a chair near the study, aligning it perfectly with the sightline of one of the cameras. A small gesture, but crucial. She had ensured that Tyler would be observed when he reached for specific documents, a controlled moment capturing his anxiety in real time. By the end of July, I had all the preliminary evidence I needed: notes, receipts, ledger discrepancies, security footage, and Tyler's behavioral reactions, all documented meticulously. The first trap was complete. It was subtle enough that he had no idea it had been set, yet powerful enough to elicit panic and confusion. I reviewed the strategy with the private investigator and family lawyer, each detail verified: dates, times, transactions, behavioral responses. Legal safeguards ensured nothing could be contested later. Every move, every subtle disruption was lawful, precise, and effective. Tyler's unraveling had begun, and the house itself had become a silent accomplice in exposing his greed. That night, I sat in my study, folding the notes neatly and placing them in the observation folder. Vanessa's subtle gestures throughout the day replayed in my mind. She was the invisible hand guiding the first step of justice. I whispered to the quiet house, "Patience and precision will expose the truth." The trap had been set. Tyler would walk into it unknowingly, and I would have every proof necessary to ensure exposure. I leaned back, listening to the faint summer breeze through the blinds. Every floorboard, every creak, every shadow had been accounted for. The household felt alive in a way it hadn't before, a chessboard of silent strategy. And in the middle of it all, Rowan, was ready, patient, and poised. The first trap was set, and the game had truly begun. The holiday dinner was approaching, and I could feel the tension coiling in the house like a living thing. Tyler's behavior had shifted dramatically since the first trap. Subtle legal interventions, the frozen accounts, the altered ledger, the misplaced keys, had begun gnawing at his composure. July 31st, the private investigator reported that Tyler was checking the ledgers 3 times a day, retracing steps obsessively, whispering to himself about missing funds and approvals. His anxiety was no longer concealed. It was radiating through every corridor, every doorway. Vanessa's role became more pronounced yet remained invisible. Small nudges, nearly imperceptible, ensured that I noticed what mattered: the crumpled $2,800 utility bill, subtly placed in plain view, receipts arranged to highlight discrepancies. Her brief glance toward me at precisely the moment a ledger anomaly appeared. I realized she was orchestrating the prelude to the holiday showdown, signaling caution and opportunity simultaneously. Her presence was a silent reminder that I was not navigating this labyrinth alone. Rumors began reaching Tyler indirectly. I had strategically leaked minor inquiries through our household network. Emily mentioned offhand that the lawyer had called to clarify account discrepancies. Margaret remarked on a bank official visiting unexpectedly, and Vanessa, carefully, allowed him to notice subtle shifts in the kitchen and study. Small, believable cues hinting that someone was scrutinizing his every move. Whispers of doubt began to seed themselves in Tyler's mind. On August 1st, I reviewed security footage from the past week. Tyler's micro-expressions were telling: clenched jaw, rapid eye movements, hesitations near the ledger. One frame caught him rifling through a folder marked July observations, the very folder I had intentionally left partially visible on the study desk. His panic was almost visible to the naked eye. Each subtle mistake he made had been anticipated, documented, and preserved as evidence. Vanessa continued to guide silently. On August 2nd, she left a folded grocery receipt behind a chair, its numbers correlating to irregular transactions Tyler had initiated. She didn't speak, didn't point, yet the message was clear to me: watch closely, note everything. Her silent coordination was precise. She had created the framework for Tyler's unraveling, ensuring that each reaction would be captured and verifiable. The household's ambient tension intensified. July 31st, August 1st, and August 2nd blurred into a series of restless days. Servants sensed the unease, moving cautiously, as if afraid to trigger or be caught in the unfolding drama. Every ordinary sound, footsteps on hardwood, the clink of silverware, doors closing, carried layered meaning. Each night, I documented anomalies, noting exact times, dollar amounts, and locations. The ledger discrepancies, the crumpled receipts, the notes, all were pieces in a growing mosaic of justice. Tyler's paranoia escalated visibly. August 3rd, I observed him checking the security camera monitors surreptitiously, adjusting angles as though expecting evidence to materialize spontaneously. His fear of exposure had begun to dominate his daily behavior, and yet he had no idea the true architect of his anxiety was Vanessa, calm, composed, and silently orchestrating the narrative. I reinforced the psychological pressure with calculated, lawful interventions: minor discrepancies in account approvals, subtle references to legal consultations, and the strategic placement of physical evidence ensured Tyler's mind was constantly occupied with the looming threat of exposure. Each move was recorded, receipts photographed, notes scanned, and behavioral reactions captured by the cameras. By August 4th, I had built a comprehensive timeline of Tyler's unraveling, evidence that would be undeniable in any eventual confrontation. Vanessa's quiet nudges continued to guide me. She never interfered overtly, but ensured that the right cues fell within Tyler's perception. On August 4th, I noticed her reposition a small ledger angled to catch the light and draw attention to a specific entry. Tyler immediately noticed it, his hand trembling slightly as he adjusted the page. That single subtle reaction was documented, time-stamped, and cross-referenced against the ledger's anomalies. By August 5th, the household tension was almost tangible. Even Jordan began sensing odd undercurrents, though he could not pinpoint the cause. Tyler's eyes darted to minor details: keys, receipts, folders, overanalyzing each element in a desperate attempt to regain control. He was a man trapped by the legal and psychological architecture I had built, unaware that Vanessa was guiding my every observation. The final piece before the holiday dinner was ensuring that all evidence and reactions were perfectly aligned. August 6th, I conducted a final review. Notes, receipts, bank statements, ledger anomalies, and security footage all cross-referenced. Every micro-expression, hesitation, and misstep by Tyler was cataloged. Vanessa's subtle, silent interventions had ensured that each step he took reinforced the narrative of his greed and manipulation. By the evening of August 6th, I sat in the study, exhausted but satisfied. The whispers of doubt had done their work. Tyler was tense, anxious, and alert, constantly anticipating exposure but unable to identify the orchestrator. Vanessa's guidance had been crucial. Her small, nearly invisible cues had ensured that each reaction could be documented, verified, and preserved for the ultimate showdown. As I leaned back, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft rustle of papers, I whispered to the quiet house, "Patience. Everything is aligning." The holiday dinner would serve as the stage, but the groundwork, the first trap, the whispers of doubt, the careful orchestration had been laid. Tyler was now walking a path of his own unraveling, and the game of justice, methodical and precise, was reaching its crescendo. The days leading up to the holiday dinner felt like walking through a house suspended in a tense, silent fog. Tyler's agitation was almost tangible. Each morning I would note his subtle behaviors, furtive glances at the ledger, repeated checking of the utility accounts, small adjustments of folders and keys, movements too deliberate to be casual. His fear of exposure had taken root. He was constantly anticipating, yet he didn't know what or who to anticipate. Vanessa remained a quiet but steady presence, her subtle gestures sliding a receipt toward me, nudging the ledger at a precise angle. A glance in my direction reinforced the growing network of observation. I began to see the elegance of her orchestration. Every note I had received, every anomaly I had documented, every observation I had logged, was now a component of a strategy designed to bring the truth to light. August 7th. The private investigator's report confirmed that Tyler was now acting almost entirely on instinct, reacting to the cues we had left in his path. A crumpled grocery receipt, a ledger note slightly misaligned, a bank statement partially visible on the kitchen counter, all had contributed to his escalating unease. Tyler didn't know he was being monitored, and he certainly didn't know that each reaction had been predicted, documented, and analyzed. I maintained my outward calm. Jordan, still unaware of the storm building around him, joked about weekend plans. Vanessa's composure never wavered. Her subtle guidance ensured that Tyler would continue to reveal himself while believing he still held some control. Every careful placement of documents, every whispered suggestion, every crumpled note was designed to heighten tension without alerting him. Household tension peaked in small ways. Servants moved carefully, sensing the unspoken stress. Emily noticed Tyler's nervous pacing and whispered to me, "He's acting strange, Dad." I nodded silently, reassuring her with a calm tone I didn't entirely feel. Every small ripple in behavior confirmed that our plan was working. Tyler was unraveling quietly, predictably, like a string slowly coming undone. I began cross-referencing notes, receipts, and ledger anomalies with the private investigator's updates. August 8th, a minor discrepancy in a $1,250 transfer appeared, one that Tyler had attempted to conceal. The timing of his visit to the study, the subtle adjustment of papers, and his hesitation as he noticed a ledger note were all captured on camera. Vanessa had ensured the moment would be observable without drawing suspicion. Her orchestration was flawless. I continued documenting behavioral cues. August 9th, Tyler's pacing increased. August 10th, he repeatedly checked account balances. August 11th, he attempted to access restricted files but found them legally frozen. Each action reinforced the narrative of his manipulation and fear of exposure. The calm before the storm was deceptive. Beneath it simmered a psychological pressure cooker that I had constructed with precision. Vanessa's quiet signals became even more crucial. August 11th, I noticed her leaving a folded note beneath the study lamp, partially hidden. The handwriting was familiar yet unreadable to anyone else. It was a prompt for me to review a specific ledger section that highlighted Tyler's unauthorized transactions. Without touching the note directly, she had ensured that I would notice it at the exact moment needed. The invisible hand guiding this orchestration was undeniable. By August 12th, all preparations were complete. The holiday dinner would serve as the public stage, but Tyler remained unaware of the scope of evidence against him. The ledger anomalies, receipts, security footage, and subtle behavioral cues had all been documented and verified. Each household member, Emily, Margaret, even the servants played a discreet role, observing without interference, ensuring that the environment was controlled and that Tyler's reactions would be preserved. The night before the dinner, I walked through the house quietly, noting the placement of every ledger, every receipt, every note. Vanessa Seppa's subtle orchestration was visible only to me, but its impact was profound. I whispered to myself, "Patience. The storm approaches, but timing is everything." The household felt alive, charged with anticipation, yet outwardly calm. Tyler remained unaware of the full extent of the surveillance, the traps, and the orchestrated cues. Vanessa's quiet guidance had ensured that every reaction he exhibited would be documented and preserved. The chessboard was set. The pieces were in place. The calm was deliberate, strategic, and utterly deceptive. As I finally settled into the study chair late on August 12th, I realized the magnitude of what had been achieved. Tyler's unraveling was near completion. The final act, the holiday dinner reveal, would bring every detail to light. Every note, receipt, ledger discrepancy, and behavioral observation had been meticulously aligned for that single decisive moment. The summer night pressed against the windows, still and heavy, yet I felt a surge of confidence. The calm before the storm was not empty. It was deliberate, crafted with precision, guided silently by Vanessa, and executed lawfully. When the storm broke, justice would be complete, evidence undeniable, and Tyler exposed. I whispered softly to the quiet house. "Everything is ready. The truth will have its moment." The calm was a mask. The storm was imminent, and I, Rowan, had orchestrated every piece with patience, precision, and unwavering determination. The house was silent as the final preparations for the holiday dinner were completed. Chandeliers cast warm golden light over the dining room, illuminating polished silverware, folded napkins, and the gleam of crystal glasses. On the surface, everything was ordinary, a celebratory gathering of family, laughter, and waiting. But beneath that calm, the storm was ready to break. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, glancing at the meticulously arranged evidence spread across the study desk. Ledger anomalies, crumpled receipts, bank statements, and notes in my handwriting that had begun this entire unraveling. Every item had been carefully cross-referenced with camera footage and behavioral cues. And then there were the subtle cues from Vanessa, which had guided my eyes to details I would have otherwise overlooked. A folded grocery receipt hinting at the $2,800 utility misappropriation. A ledger note highlighting unauthorized transfers. The placement of keys to suggest tampering. Guests began arriving. Emily moved quietly between rooms, subtly noting everyone's behavior without drawing attention. Margaret greeted the friends and relatives who had no idea of the tension simmering beneath the evening's formality. The servants moved with an understated grace. Yet I sensed their awareness of the house's charged atmosphere. Every element, every placement, had been orchestrated to maximize exposure and clarity. Tyler entered last, forcing a practiced smile that did little to hide the twitch in his eye. The moment he noticed the study ledger partially visible on the dining room sideboard, his hand paused mid-motion as if caught. I could almost feel his panic radiating through the room. His shoulders tensed. Every subtle indicator of his anxiety had been captured and catalogued. The trap was set, and he had stepped squarely into it. Dinner began. Conversation flowed casually, small talk, family jokes, mundane chatter. I moved deliberately, observing Tyler as he reached for his fork, adjusting his napkin, glancing at the sideboard. Vanessa, poised and calm beside him, offered a faint smile. A subtle, invisible nod told me everything I needed. She had positioned the crumpled $2,800 bill perfectly, ensuring that I could reveal it at the precise moment. I cleared my throat. "I noticed something unusual while reviewing the household accounts," I said casually, as if the thought had only just occurred. I let my gaze linger on Tyler. A number here, a transfer there, approvals, some things down that spit match up. Tyler's fork froze midair. The entire room became acutely aware of the shift in energy, though no words yet suggested the impending confrontation. Vanessa's hand subtly brushed against a stack of receipts, guiding my motion as I casually picked up the crumpled $2,800 bill and held it for the table to see. "I found this," I said, placing it gently on the table. "It sets part of a utility payment that, well, it shouldn't have been authorized without proper approval." Tyler's eyes widened, lips pressed tight. He shifted in his chair, scanning faces, calculating damage, realizing for the first time that someone had been observing him far more closely than he had ever imagined. I continued, keeping my voice calm, measured. "And these," I said, lifting the partial receipts and notes, "align perfectly with transactions and ledger entries that were unusual, unexplained." My gaze fell on the ledger, angled to catch the light, revealing highlighted entries marking Tyler's manipulations. Vanessa subtly placed another document in front of me, a bank statement confirming the unauthorized $32,000 transfer attempt. Her eyes met mine briefly. No words were needed. She had orchestrated the cues flawlessly. Tyler, now fully aware of the scrutiny, had nowhere to hide. I paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle. The room was silent, save for a faint hum from the chandelier above. "Tyler," I said, my voice low, firm, "these actions, unauthorized approvals, ledger manipulations, and misappropriated funds cannot go unaddressed." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, trapped by both his own actions and the meticulous documentation displayed before him. The private investigator had captured every move, every hesitation, every micro-expression, every note I had documented, every crumpled receipt, every subtle cue left by Vanessa converged in this moment. The lawyer, who had been quietly observing, stood and spoke. "Mr. Tyler, all evidence here is verifiable. Unauthorized transfers, ledger discrepancies, and observed behaviors leave little room for dispute. Legal action will follow unless restitution is made immediately." Tyler's composure cracked. His hand trembled as he reached for a napkin, crumpling it absent-mindedly. Every calculated movement, every micro-expression I had anticipated, now unfolded naturally. He glanced at Vanessa, realizing too late that her calm had been an invisible scaffolding, guiding me through the process. He had been exposed publicly, undeniably, and yet privately guided by the very person he had underestimated. I let the silence stretch, the tension coiling like a spring in the room. Tyler's panic was nearly audible, the subtle tremor in his voice as he stammered, attempting explanations, meaningless in the face of comprehensive documentation. I moved through the room, keeping a composed demeanor, placing each piece of evidence on the table casually, as if it were mere household paperwork. Emily and Margaret watched silently, their eyes reflecting relief and astonishment. The servants, too, sensed the gravity of the moment, maintaining composure while understanding that justice was unfolding before them. Tyler's brotherly pride, his greed, his manipulation, all laid bare. Vanessa finally allowed herself a subtle smile, a signal only I could interpret. She had orchestrated every cue, guided my observation, and ensured that the public exposure was precise, impactful, and irreversible. The $2,800 bill, the $32,000 attempted transfer, the misaligned ledger entries all pointed to the same conclusion. Tyler's deception had been uncovered by methodical strategy, patient observation, and quiet orchestration. Tyler's defeat was complete. The combination of legal authority, irrefutable documentation, and silent guidance left him with no path to escape accountability. The public exposure was absolute, the evidence irrefutable. As the room slowly exhaled, I allowed myself a quiet reflection. Months of observation, subtle guidance, and patience had culminated in this moment. Justice was not about cruelty. It was about methodical exposure, clear boundaries, and protecting the legacy of family, home, and trust. And as I looked at Vanessa, calm and composed, I finally understood the depth of her subtle, unwavering support. The storm had broken, but it had been guided with precision, care, and invisible hands, ensuring that every reaction, every step, and every micro-expression reinforced the truth. The chandelier light glinted off the crystal glasses, warm and golden. The room was quiet now, charged with relief, shock, and the undeniable clarity of truth. Tyler had been exposed. The evidence, meticulously documented and subtly orchestrated, had delivered justice without cruelty. only the satisfaction of methodical, measured, undeniable accountability. I poured myself a glass of water, listening to the soft clink against the crystal. A quiet smile crossed my face. Months of patient observation, subtle orchestration, and unwavering vigilance had paid off. Justice had its moment, and it was precise, perfect, and irreversible. The aftermath was surreal. The immediate tension of the holiday dinner had dissolved into a strange, quiet stillness. Tyler retreated to his room pale and defeated, acutely aware that every move he had made was documented and irrefutable. The household, once a stage of silent anxiety, was now a space of cautious relief. Banks froze his attempted transfers. Contracts he had manipulated were flagged. Ledger anomalies were corrected. Each intervention, legal and precise, reinforced the consequences of his greed. The $2,800 utility misappropriation, the $32,000 attempted transfer, and the subtle ledger manipulations, all verified and publicly acknowledged through Vanessa's silent orchestration and my documentation. Tyler had no room to maneuver. Jordan, initially oblivious, now witnessed the truth unfolding. His expression shifted from confusion to astonishment, then to cautious understanding. I could see the relief in his posture, the knowledge that the estate, the home, and our family legacy had been preserved. Vanessa remained calm, almost invisible in the background, yet her quiet satisfaction was evident in the subtle alignment of the receipts, notes, and ledger entries. Every cue she had left, every guidance she had given, had ensured that the exposure was precise, methodical, and unassailable. She had been the silent hand orchestrating the dominoes to fall exactly as intended. I began the process of securing the estate. Contracts, bank accounts, and official documents were reviewed, cross-referenced, and locked. July and August's observations, notes, and receipts were meticulously archived. The private investigators' reports were organized chronologically. Every micro-expression, every hesitation by Tyler had been captured and cataloged. The household felt orderly, methodical, restored. The family, friends, and even the household staff sensed the shift. Emily whispered to me, "It feels like a weight has lifted." Margaret nodded silently, eyes reflecting the tension's release. Tyler, though still present in the house, was subdued, stripped of confidence and aware of the consequences. The combination of legal authority, irrefutable evidence, and carefully orchestrated exposure had neutralized his threat. Evenings now had a different rhythm. The household moved with measured calm. Tyler avoided direct confrontation, confined largely to his room and tasks that did not challenge the restored order. Jordan resumed his routines, reassured that the estate and our family were protected. Vanessa's quiet gestures continued, though subtle, almost as if confirming that the course of justice had been maintained. I spent late nights reviewing the documentation once more. Receipts, bank statements, ledger discrepancies, and security footage. Each entry reinforced the narrative I had carefully constructed. The law, combined with precise observation and patient orchestration, had delivered justice without excess cruelty. Tyler's personal motives, greed and resentment, were now fully exposed, preserved in evidence for any future need. By the end of the first week post-exposure, the household had shifted from tension to cautious normalcy. Every creak in the floorboards, every flicker of light, and every ambient sound reminded me that vigilance remained necessary. Notes and receipts that had once triggered panic now served as reminders. Careful observation, patience, and methodical strategy could protect family and legacy from betrayal. I reflected on the lessons of the past month. Tyler's exposure had been public yet precise. His panic recorded and verified, and justice achieved without compromising ethical boundaries. The orchestrated guidance, subtle yet undeniable, had proven essential. The household, once fractured by doubt and manipulation, now moved forward with a renewed sense of security. Even in quiet moments, I reminded myself, betrayal might be inevitable, but exposure and justice are deliberate. Vanessa's invisible hand had been crucial, Tyler's unraveling a testament to methodical patience, and our family's legacy preserved through vigilance and lawful strategy. The aftermath was not chaos. It was measured, precise, and affirming. The legal proceedings moved with deliberate precision, By mid-August, Tyler's misappropriations were confirmed through evidence I had meticulously cataloged: ledger anomalies, crumpled receipts, the $32,000 attempted transfer, and unauthorized approvals. Each detail was verifiable, time-stamped, and cross-referenced. The family lawyer, already familiar with the household's orchestration, filed the necessary documentation to protect our estate and enforce restitution. Tyler's personal motives, greed, resentment, and entitlement, became apparent in every meeting. His attempts at explanation fell flat against the comprehensive, methodically organized evidence. Each ledger entry, each bank statement, each crumpled receipt aligned with behavioral recordings captured by the cameras I had installed and the subtle guidance Vanessa had provided. He had no room to maneuver. By August 15th, restitution was enforced. Funds were returned and accounts corrected. Legal authority confirmed the integrity of each action I had taken, verifying that all interventions were lawful, ethical, and precise. Tyler could no longer claim ignorance or innocence. The evidence left no ambiguity. His manipulations had been deliberate, systematic, and self-serving. Family dynamics began to stabilize. Jordan, witnessing justice unfold, regained trust in the household's leadership and in the preservation of our legacy. Emily and Margaret played subtle, supportive roles throughout, observing quietly while maintaining household composure. Vanessa's invisible orchestration continued, though her guidance became less necessary as the consequences of Tyler's actions became undeniable. The private investigator's final report, dated August 16th, detailed every anomaly, behavioral cue, and documented discrepancy. Each item in the report corresponded to the evidence I had collected: crumpled receipts, altered ledger entries, unauthorized fund movements, and security footage capturing Tyler's anxious reactions. The report solidified the narrative for any potential future scrutiny or challenge. Justice was measured, precise, and complete. Tyler had been exposed not through vengeance but through meticulous documentation, methodical observation, and lawful intervention. Each step of the process had reinforced the principles that guided me: patience, accuracy, and the preservation of family legacy. The household returned to a semblance of normalcy. Tyler's movements were constrained, his confidence subdued. Daily routines resumed with careful oversight, but the tension had transformed from fear of unknown betrayal to recognition of accountability. The legacy, the home, finances, and family trust remained intact. I reflected on the orchestration of justice. It was not about retribution, it was about methodical exposure, ethical resolution, and protecting what mattered most. Vanessa's role had been essential, a silent, precise guide, ensuring that each step aligned with legal and ethical standards while revealing Tyler's true character. The summer air outside the Dallas windows was heavy, yet inside a calm determination had settled. Notes in my handwriting, once a symbol of fear, were now archived as proof of observation, patience, and strategic intervention. Every anomaly, every cue, and every subtle guide had contributed to the restoration of order. I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. Months of careful observation, patient orchestration, and unwavering focus had culminated in measured justice. Tyler had been exposed, the estate secured, and the household returned to stability. The lesson was clear: vigilance, methodical planning, and ethical strategy ensure that betrayal is met not with rash vengeance, but with precise, verifiable justice. And in the quiet of the study, with ledger entries aligned, receipts archived, and cameras turned off, I whispered to the house, to the night, to myself: justice measured and deliberate is the truest revenge. Evenings returned to a quiet rhythm. The house, once taut with tension, now breathed with measured calm. Tyler remained present but subdued, aware that his manipulations had been meticulously documented, legally challenged, and fully exposed. The immediate threat had dissipated, but vigilance lingered, like a soft hum beneath the walls of the Dallas home. I poured myself a cup of tea one late August night, watching the amber liquid ripple in the dim kitchen light. Notes in my handwriting, once a symbol of fear, rested folded neatly on the counter, archived in chronological order. Each one told a story: subtle warning, careful observation, patient anticipation. They reminded me not just of betrayal, but of what it takes to protect family, legacy, and trust. Vanessa, quietly supportive throughout, moved around the kitchen with the same calm precision I had come to rely upon. Her subtle gestures, once guides through the storm of Tyler's schemes, were now comforting. I realized that her presence had not only ensured the exposure of deceit, but it also reminded me of the power of patience and strategic action. She had been a silent partner in maintaining justice, invisible to everyone except me. Jordan, witnessing the events unfold, began to regain trust in the household's integrity and in the preservation of our estate. His laughter returned in small increments, lightening the space that had been heavy with uncertainty. Emily and Margaret resumed family rituals, preparing for the end of summer celebrations, their calm reassurance reinforcing the sense of restored normalcy. I revisited the crumpled $2,800 utility bill, now neatly archived alongside receipts, ledger anomalies, and bank statements. Each detail reinforced the meticulous care that had allowed us to reclaim order. The private investigator's reports, Vanessa's subtle cues, and the legal confirmations collectively formed a comprehensive narrative, a blueprint for measured justice. Sitting in the study, I reflected on the orchestration of the past weeks. The notes, the receipts, the silent interventions, they were more than evidence, they were lessons. Each anomaly had demanded attention, patience, and discernment. Every subtle cue from Vanessa, every hesitation and misstep by Tyler, had contributed to a tableau of justice executed without cruelty. The weight of observation and anticipation had transformed into a quiet satisfaction. Justice, I realized, was not in vengeance, but in precision, in foresight, in careful orchestration that allowed truth to emerge unassailably. Tyler's exposure had been complete, methodical, and undeniable, yet humane. I listened to the distant footsteps of Jordan moving through the hallway, the gentle hum of the ceiling fan, the soft creak of the floorboards. Each sound reminded me that life continued, measured, deliberate, and watched over carefully. Notes that once prompted fear now served as markers of vigilance, reminders that legacy requires attention, care, and resolve. Pouring tea, I whispered into the quiet study. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. The aphorism lingered in the air, a distilled truth of the months of careful observation, subtle orchestration, and ethical justice. Betrayal, once a threat, had become a catalyst for awareness, discipline, and measured action. I reflected on the household. Tyler subdued, the estate secured, family trust restored, and Vanessa's quiet guidance acknowledged silently but profoundly. The house itself seemed to exhale, its walls now repositories of both tension resolved and vigilance preserved. The narrative of betrayal had transformed into a testament of methodical strategy and careful planning. Even in moments of silence, I felt the weight of responsibility. Observing, recording, guiding, and orchestrating had been exhausting but necessary. Each creak, each shadow, each rustle of papers had been anticipated, documented, and leveraged to protect what mattered most. The culmination was not just exposure, but restoration, restoration of legacy, trust, and household equilibrium. As the night deepened, I closed my journal, aligned the notes and receipts, and allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. The house, calm and measured, seemed to acknowledge the resolution of months of tension. Betrayal had been confronted, justice had been executed, and the lessons were archived in both paper and memory. I leaned back, savoring the tea, the silence, and the restored equilibrium. The reflection was clear. Vigilance, methodical observation, and ethical strategy ensure that betrayal meets precise, deliberate justice. And in that quiet, I understood fully that the cost of integrity is patience, and the reward is clarity, security, and the preservation of legacy. Weeks had passed since the holiday dinner, but the echoes of exposure still lingered in the quiet corners of the house. Tyler, having retreated in defeat, kept to himself. His presence no longer carried the weight of threat. Instead, it was a silent reminder of the consequences of deceit. The household had found a new rhythm, measured, deliberate, and anchored in the certainty of justice. I began the careful process of archiving every note, receipt, ledger discrepancy, and security recording. Each document, each observation, had been meticulously cross-referenced, cataloged, and secured. The $2,800 utility bill, The $32,000 attempted transfer, crumpled receipts, and behavioral logs were placed in folders labeled by date and evidence type. The private investigator's reports were filed alongside notes of Vanessa's subtle interventions. Every piece told a story of patience, vigilance, and methodical exposure. Emily and Margaret assisted quietly, ensuring that the organization was thorough. The household's calm was restored, yet vigilance remained. Every item archived was a lesson, an instruction in awareness, foresight, and the power of methodical observation. I realized that what had begun as a series of urgent, threatening notes had transformed into a comprehensive manual for family security, legacy preservation, and strategic intervention. Vanessa's subtle role continued to resonate. Her guidance had been invisible yet critical. Each cue she left, each micro-intervention she orchestrated, had ensured that Tyler's actions were documented and his deception exposed. Archiving the lessons now served not only as evidence, but also as a record of her indispensable orchestration. The household resumed normal routines. Family dinners returned to a measured calm, laughter and conversation threading through the evenings once more. Yet the lessons remained tangible, visible in the meticulously archived evidence, the orderly ledgers, and the organized study. Every document, every note, every receipt was a marker of both betrayal and the methodical path to justice. I reflected on the importance of vigilance. Betrayal might always emerge, but through careful observation, patience, and lawful intervention, it can be confronted and resolved. The archives were more than proof, they were lessons in strategy, ethical justice, and the preservation of trust. Even Tyler, now subdued, became part of the living lesson. His presence reminded the household of the consequences of manipulation, the inevitability of exposure, and the power of precision. Each subtle shift in his behavior, each attempt at concealment had been anticipated and preserved. By the end of August, the archives were complete. Every note and receipt was filed chronologically, every ledger anomaly documented with date, time, and corresponding observation. Security footage was cataloged, behavioral logs summarized, and Vanessa's cues carefully annotated. The lessons were no longer theoretical. They were tangible, accessible, and enduring. Sitting in the study one evening, I ran my fingers over the folders, feeling the weight of history, vigilance, and restoration. Each document told a story of patience, each archived item a testament to strategic observation. The past months had been exhausting, yet the knowledge that the household, the estate, and family trust were preserved brought a quiet satisfaction. I whispered to myself, reflecting on the journey: betrayal can teach, exposure can heal, and methodical action can restore balance. The lessons were no longer ephemeral. They were archived, ready to guide future vigilance, ensuring that trust and legacy are never again threatened without consequence. And in that quiet, I understood fully: evidence is not just proof, but a teacher, a guardian, and a shield. Each archived item preserves not just memory, but wisdom, ensuring that the household remains secure and the legacy intact. The summer air in Dallas had softened into late August warmth, and the household moved in a calm, predictable rhythm. The chaos of exposure, betrayal, and methodical intervention had passed, leaving behind a quiet, measured stability. Tyler remained subdued, the consequences of his actions fully realized. Jordan, Emily, and Margaret embraced the new order, their trust restored, their routines unshaken. And then, one morning, I found it, a final note, folded neatly, tucked beneath my tea saucer, like the very first one that had begun this chain of events weeks ago. The handwriting was mine, yet the content was simple, harmless, and protective. Watch your accounts carefully. Trust carefully. I smiled quietly. The note wasn't a warning of betrayal. It was a safeguard, a lesson, a reminder. The months of tension, observation, and careful orchestration had crystallized into vigilance. What had once been a symbol of fear had transformed into a tool for foresight, a reinforcement of the household's security and legacy. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, calm and composed, her subtle guidance now acknowledged silently. She had been the invisible hand throughout the ordeal, ensuring that every reaction, every observation, and every cue was captured and directed toward truth and justice. Her quiet orchestration had been indispensable. I reviewed the archives one last time: receipts, ledger anomalies, crumpled bills, security footage, and detailed notes of behavioral observations. Every piece told a story of patience, precision, and methodical strategy. Each item preserved the narrative of betrayal while providing a blueprint for future vigilance. The household felt lighter yet layered with awareness. Tyler's presence was no longer threatening but served as a living reminder of what unfolds when greed and manipulation go unchecked. Jordan's trust had been restored, Emily and Margaret's support reinforced, and Vanessa's quiet guidance remained a permanent, albeit invisible, stabilizing force. I folded the final note and placed it carefully in the archive folder, alongside the first, marking the completion of the journey. The progression from the first note through sleepless nights, subtle interventions, meticulously set traps, exposure, and measured justice was now fully preserved. Each act, each reaction, each observation had contributed to a complete narrative of justice achieved through patience, lawfulness, and precision. As I poured tea that evening, the house bathed in golden light from the late afternoon sun, I reflected on the months of meticulous orchestration. Betrayal had not destroyed us. It had taught us. Exposure had not caused chaos. It had restored order. The legacy, our home, our family, and the trust within it remained intact. I whispered to the quiet house. The notes will guide the next generation, but trust will always be earned, carefully and deliberately. The first and last notes, now resting together in the archive, symbolized the journey from fear to foresight, from betrayal to measured vigilance. And as I watched Jordan move through the hallway, Emily arranging the dinner table, and Vanessa's calm presence guiding the household with subtlety, I understood fully: betrayal may return in another form, but preparation, observation, and patience ensure that it is met not with panic, but with justice and clarity. The final note was a closing chapter, yet also a beginning, an enduring reminder that vigilance and measured action are the truest forms of protection. Life resumed rhythmically, the household secure, the legacy preserved, and the lessons archived for future reflection. I took a slow sip of tea, listening to distant footsteps and the soft hum of the summer evening. A quiet smile crossed my face as I realized the journey from fear to justice was complete. Every note, every observation, every subtle orchestration had ensured the family's safety, the estate's security, and the measured fulfillment of justice. And in the silence, I finally whispered to myself, at peace. Betrayal Sep's echo has transformed into lessons, vigilance, and triumph.